How to arrest the government. Trump's indictment puts pressure on GOP aspirants to propose sweeping reforms. In seeking an unprecedented federal indictment against a former president, the Justice Department carelessly issued an additional arrest warrant, its own. Republicans are no longer simply moaning about weaponized government and the unaccountable swamp. They are making complete overhaul a campaign priority. Most of the press continues obsessing over the GOP primary field's response to Donald Trump's indictment, presenting it as an impossible bind. How can they get any airtime amid another Trump show? How do they hit the former president without alienating the base? The first debate is still 2 months away, the first caucus 7, but it's never too early for this crew to paint Republican fortunes as grim. Lost in this non-analysis is that the indictment handed the entire field a powerful issue: root and branch government reform. The Trump presidency was roiled by a partisan FBI investigation, non-stop leaks, endless bureaucratic sabotage. Republicans have complained about a 2 million-strong federal civil service that has been hostile to GOP presidents since Ronald Reagan, yet failed to make a priority of change. The indictment was the straw that broke the elephant's back, the kick the party needed to get serious. Nearly every notable contender, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, Ron DeSantis, has already vowed to fire the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Christopher Wray, in response to alarming stories of investigations into protesting parents, Catholics and pro-life groups as well as election interference. Mr. Scott says he'd go further and dismiss all political appointees at the FBI. Nikki Haley suggests something more sweeping: getting rid of just senior management isn't going to be enough to fix this. This is going to take a complete overhaul. Unsurprisingly, a very detailed, and far more aggressive, plan is coming from energetic entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy, whose warnings about the unelected bureaucracy have been a central campaign feature from the start. He pledges to dismantle the education department, which should not have existed in the first place. He'd shut down agencies whose culture cannot be reformed, including the FBI and the Internal Revenue Service, and replace them with entities that are built for purpose and answer to the president. He'd fire a good portion of the federal bureaucracy, ignoring civil service protections that he believes are unconstitutional. He wants an 8-year term limit on federal civil servant positions. Ms. Haley has also called for limits. Mr. Ramaswamy is getting a rival in the Policy Innovation Department in Mr. DeSantis, who this week started to roll out his Day One plan to revamp all of government. According to a Real Clear Politics report, the Florida governor in a weekend strategy session said that in addition to firings, he plans to reorganize entire agencies, which will include limiting and refocusing the roles of both the Justice Department and the FBI. It will also include breaking up federal agencies, including Justice, and shipping them to other parts of the country, doubling down on a few similar small moves during the Trump administration. The report suggests Mr. DeSantis will also face down civil service protections: if you're performing poorly, you should be fired. It doesn't matter if you're a bureaucrat or if you're a political appointee. He'll put a renewed focus on finding leakers, who will face instant termination, and potentially revoke the security clearances of former intelligence officials who cash in as talking heads. Mr. Trump in 2020 passed on making government overhaul a campaign priority, though this March he issued a 10-point plan to dismantle the deep state. It led with broad promises to clean out corrupt actors and overhaul weaponized institutions, while also pledging to create a Truth and Reconciliation Commission to expose hoaxes, to make inspectors general more independent, and to move more agencies out of Washington. Yet by this week, in the wake of his indictment, Mr. Trump seemed more interested in channeling existing abuses of power to his own benefit, promising to appoint a real special prosecutor to go after the entire Biden crime family. Expect to see far more and detailed proposals from the GOP field, given how much material there now is to draw from. As the administrative state has run amok, serious policy thinkers have drilled for solutions. Authors like Philip K. Howard, Not Accountable, and former Interior Secretary David Bernhardt, You Report to Me, offer books outlining strong reforms. Conservative think tanks are sitting on reams of paper, red state reforms highlight successes and pitfalls. Name a problem in the federal government, and there's already an innovative plan for solving it. In the aftermath of the Trump indictment, every credible aspirant for the Republican nomination will be expected to have a vision to take control of a federal apparatus that has been on autopilot for decades. Thanks, Joe Biden and Merrick Garland. Your overreach has finally produced a GOP determined to make sure the excesses stop. How to arrest the government. Trump's indictment puts pressure on GOP aspirants to propose sweeping reforms. In seeking an unprecedented federal indictment against a former president, the Justice Department carelessly issued an additional arrest warrant, its own. Republicans are no longer simply moaning about weaponized government and the unaccountable swamp. They are making complete overhaul a campaign priority. How to know whether Ukraine's counteroffensive is working. By launching its long-planned counteroffensive, Ukraine has just taken a decisive step down the path of driving Russian forces from its territory. But it is early days still, and there is much we don't know. Confusion is the only thing you can count on during a moment like this. During 3 tours in Iraq and Afghanistan as a brigade commander and a director of operations, I often had great difficulty visualizing and understanding what was going on in a fight, even with the latest command and control systems. And I certainly was never involved in a fight as large, violent and disorienting as the battles underway in Ukraine. Reports from field commanders to their leaders are typically incomplete and confusing. Drones help, but technology will never fully succeed in lifting the fog of war. Although Western audiences justifiably want to understand how the fight is going in real time, we should remember the axiom that first reports are never as good or as bad as they sound. I think the Ukrainians can and will win this fight. But the summer is likely to be long and difficult. We will not be able to judge how successful the counteroffensive has been for quite some time. That said, here are some things to keep in mind in these early days. While the counteroffensive has been launched, I do not think the main attack has yet started. The Ukrainian General Staff will want to keep the Russians guessing about where it will take place for as long as possible. So far, it appears that the Ukrainians are still probing for vulnerabilities they can exploit and reinforcing local tactical successes. As a result, a few villages have been liberated, and about 100 square kilometers of territory have been recaptured. We will know the main attack has started when we see large groupings of armored forces, 2 or 3 armored brigades attacking in one direction. How large is a brigade? Ukrainian tank battalions usually contain 31 tanks, and armored infantry battalions have a similar number of armored vehicles. Each battalion will also contain additional armor-carrying engineers, air defense and logistics. An armored brigade would have 4 or 5 tank and armored infantry battalions. A typical Ukrainian brigade therefore is likely to have at least 250 armored vehicles of different types. To date,